Right, cool. So here's a problem. Um, Obviously, we won't be focusing much on the problem. I think I might, but we'll see, because at least it doesn't take long. So my 2 cent earlier just wanted maybe us to focus on these things. There's a lot of weird stuff happening here, and some of us were not familiar with this. Like, we've seen it, but we've never like coded anything that has to do with this part. So basically what I didn't research much because I was lazy. I just focused on the standard output and the standard input and process, right? So I went to Node.js to check the documentation. So this is obviously a Node.js environment, hence JavaScript and brackets has Node.js when you're choosing your language here, right? So if you check the documentation, already have it open. I won't explain much, but Node has this process function, so they use that to take in inputs or to write inputs, and then they have that on. Let me just try and so we have this. So this is an input stream, right? We have process.standard in. So this just reads in or scans in a user input, right? I think there's also this part on HackerEarth, just didn't focus on it. And then we have standard output. So this one is for writing. So we'll usually go with write. So this is also a stream. It's for writing out your data, right? I won't explain much, and I think you guys have covered that. Console log and process dot standard out or write are not the same, but one thing you will note from this is that these two are actually based on process, right? Not even sure where I read that. But it's somewhere here. So console log uses process.standard out, right? So this means everything actually prints using this part, and then console.log became smarter and is able to handle like a whole lot of different things using process.standard output, right? So let's just go back and then I'll try and explain quickly. Right, so we have this part, function takes in your input, and whatever input you have, it saves it on this variable. So this is what I was explaining. This part is your scanner. It scans your input, right? And then this is on. It's like an event listener. It waits or listens for the user to place in an input, and then it processes that. So that's why we are saving it on a global variable so that we can use it later on. Here we are using it as an input to our main. So when we call main with this input, it should work, right? What else am I leaving? Oh, right. So where is it? Yeah. So this one is just for displaying items, and I think you guys have also covered that it only works with strings. So hence, whenever you want to print something, just start with double quotes. It should work, right? Yeah, basically that's it. And the reason I think they use this instead of console.log, I think it's how they test their input, their test cases rather. So yeah, if you have a console log, I don't think they will test that with your test cases. It will definitely fail because you'll be printing two things. So whatever you print out here, that's what they test against their own code, and then either that test case passes or fails, right? So yeah, that's basically what I understood with this environment. And then from there, what we also need to see, I think I've also explained our input, the one that listens for inputs, that calls in the main function. So whenever we've taken in all the input from our user, so this one, so once we have that, we call our main function. So this is what runs after you've solved everything. So you can write an extra function here, but this is what gets called, right? So now you will see that you'll do some cascading so that everything works, but it's not that deep. So you call your main function with the entire input which you've already taken from the above function, right? And here they just define it. So if for better understanding, just drag this and place it here. Yeah, I understand things easier if they flow sequential. So you define a function called main, and then it takes in an input, and then you use that input however you want to use it, right? And then now you are running the function that you've defined. So this is how you run it. It's just call main with whatever input that you have stored here at the top, right? So the cascading happens here. So if you have a function that may pretty much, I didn't read this problem, but I'll just try and guess. So let's say you have a function that says solve me, and then it takes in an input as well. I think in is, what is this? I forgot, keyword, so we can't use that. So we have solved me, it takes in this, and then it returns that, right? So it returns that. So now what we want to do, we want it to be called here where we are printing, right? So our main function prints out our solution or our result. So this is what will be compared. So this is the cascade part. So this is where you will call your function. So we'll call solve me here with this input, right? And then whatever that will be returned here will just be displayed as an output. So this is the cascading that I'm talking about, that you have a function that gets called here in this function, and then this function gets called here. Yeah, basically that's it. That's it. That's it. It's not that deep. We can try and split our input and see if it's working or not. Yeah, maybe let me just try that. So this one I think it's quite easy. So we have let's just use const data. This is equals to input dot split. So this one, it's those cases where you have just one, like one input. So we only have one. This is it, and everything is separated by a new line. So that's why we're splitting it, so that we'll have an array. So at this point, data will be an array with 1, 2, 88, 42, and 99. So this means our function will take in an array, right? And what we want to do, we want to print out everything that is not the number 42, right? So after we process 42, I think I didn't read the problem. So we could just do that. Let's just do a simple if statement, since I didn't read the problem. For I I'm unsure if console log will work in this case, but let's see. experimenting doesn't hurt. So I actually learned that I don't have to define. So let value of R, yeah, and yeah, so we'll just have a basic if statement like this. So if v is not equal to 42, I don't know if the question was based on 42 or not. So we print. I don't need the curly braces. So it's console.log view, and then if it's 42, we just return. So we want it to stop, right? Let's see if it works. I don't know. I don't even know if this will work. But we'll see. So now we want this to be an array, so which we've done that here, so we can just pass in data and it should work. So let's just see if we have mistakes, errors. It will tell us. So I have a runtime error with my return. Makes sense. So no, so maybe we can have something like this. Yeah, let's just use the normal one, and then as return. This should work. So we want it to stop immediately when it finds 42. It shouldn't print anything else, right? So let's see if that works. Let's see. It's so freaking slow. Wrong answer. Okay, it worked, but it's slow. So I did return, but my last part was undefined, and this was not supposed to be returned, right? So what we need to do, I think it's this return. It's definitely this return. Let me see if I return an empty space. Let's see. Yeah, dividing is not easy. Oh, I have a full stop. I forgot to remove that. Forgot. Let's hope it passes, unless they will check that empty string. Oh, please don't check the empty string. Yeah, we passed, so it works. So we had a function that prints out everything that is not 42, and remember this console.log gets called here on our standard. Awesome. So here's an example with multiple input statements or multiple test cases, right? I believe this was done during the day, so you can skip if you understood it. And please remember, I won't be doing any problem solving for this question. I'll just be splitting the data for us, or just mentioning some ways or tips that I think will help to split your input format so that it works for you, right? So basically you need to go through the problem, just read it through and check what is required to build your function. So in this case, you'll be given a table with rows and columns, and those columns will contain black and white cells, and now you need to find the maximum number of black cells, and yeah, black cells in the shapes that you will be given, and then yeah, you just return that. So the maximum consecutive black cells in any row, and then that's the number that you will be returning. So our focus will basically be here, and the environment. I've already explained some things about the environment, so I'll just focus on the input format and how you split it in the environment. So when we read this, we'll see that the first line will contain T, which is our test cases, and then after that T, we'll have a second line which will have N and M, which denotes our rows and columns. And then from there we'll basically have those rows and columns right afterwards. We have an example here. So T is 10, so this means we have 10 test cases, so we're expecting 10 outputs, right? And then from there we will have our rows and columns on our first line, and then from there we'll have all the rows that I mentioned. So if it's 2, we'll have 2 rows. If it's 7, we'll have 7 rows, right? So now we need to find a way to extract only the important parts so that they work for our function the same way that we do on HackerEarth and other platforms, I believe. So let me just expand this, and I hope it's visible. So basically what we're gonna do on this one, we'll focus on this part, and then we'll create a fake function that solves the problem for us. So basically, I don't know why I'm struggling with my cursor. So you'll have something like this: function max borders. Remember, we're writing a function that will return the number of maximum borders, right? And then your function can take in just the lines or shapes, whatever you want to call it. We can call it lines, right? And then from lines you can extract the number of rows and columns. So just know that your input will be dependent on how you split your data there at the top. So yeah, however you split it, that will help you. So if lines will be extracted as an array, then you definitely have your rows and columns from that array. But for now, let's just pretend it's like this, right? So we have a row, column, and lines as our input, and then we have a function like this where we have max defined as 0, and then we do some cool stuff here to solve the problem, which is the part that I mentioned that I'll skip, and then the last part will return our max, right? So this is the function that we'll use in our main. So whatever we return here represents this part, so we'll be returning numbers on this function. So now you just pretend that you are coding for one test case. So this is like the goal. Pretend as if you're testing for one, you're coding for one test case, right? So you have max, you have your return, you have your code, it works. Now return is there. So now the whole thing that we have to do, we have to find a way to extract this part from our input, right? So that we get here. So we have input here. So basically the first thing that we can do, we can just define our let me use let, because I think I'll be manipulating this. So we'll define our data, the one that we receive from the input, right? So this will split with a new line, right? And the reason we do that, it's because we want to have an array instead of everything being on a new line. So everything will be on a single line like that. So it will be 10 to 5, just like that, going straight. And then from there it will be easier to manipulate our data, right? So after we've done this part, so what I would do before we carry on with this part, I want to deal with this section of the code where we output our returns. So this part, which I mentioned that I believe that whatever you return needs to be written with right, because that's what they test against their test cases basically. So what we will do here, we'll just introduce our function which we called max border, and then max border will take in RC and lines, right, and then we can remove the high. Yeah, basically we'll have this, so every time process.out gets called, we'll have a number that is returned here. So if it's 4, we will have 4, and then it will go to the next line like that, right? So now that we have our data, we want to find t, so we can define t as const, and remember t is the first value that we have here. So now we have an array, so now everything looks like this, some data like this, right? So we just want to take the first part. So basically what I'll be doing, this is just the rough idea. I usually go with the first idea I have, and then I simplify later on. So I'll be manipulating data until we are on the last part of the test case. So what I'll do, I'll just pop out the first part t. So I'll have pass int, right, and then we'll have in, not input, data dot pop. It's not pop, it's actually shift, so it's, we are taking out the first part of the code. So we'll be shifting our array by 1. So at this point we'll be having t, so it's good practice to just test your stuff, but I think because of RNC I won't test now. Let's just pretend everything is working so far. So here we have our value t, and this one should be 10, right, and then our array should now start from the value 2, right? So remember here we have 10 as our initial value, and now data looks something like this: 2 space 15 comma the next bunch of stuff, right? So now we want to take this and save it on our row and column. So what do? We repeat what we just did, so we can have const again. I'll use a destructor because I think it's easier to just save your data. Yeah, 2 variables, it's that easy. So we'll have data again. We'll just copy and paste because I'm not a fast typer. So we have this, right? So after we have shifted, remember when you pop something out, so it means we are removing this part. So when we remove this part, it returns 2 and 15. But now remember that this 2 and 15 are separated by a space, and they are the next thing on our array. So we want to join these two. We want to distract it so that R equates to 2 and C equates to 50. So what we need to do, we need to convert what we have into an array, right? So we split by what? An empty space. So now we have our values R and C, right? So we just need to do the last part and then we are done, right? So the next part is to find our lines, right? So our lines basically will be something like this. To let lines equals to, I'm just extracting everything before I will just start moving things around so that we see why I wrote certain things a certain way. So if you want lines, we just need to slice our stuff remember we've popped this 2 and 5, so now we have lines at position 0. So now we want to take everything from position 0 until the last row that they mentioned. So we can use splice for this one, slice rather. We can use slice, and then we slice from 0 to the number of rows that we were given. So if they said there's 2 rows, right? So at this point, after we've removed this part, let me just continue this. I hope it aids with demonstration. So after we've removed this, the next thing we have is this line and comma whatever. Let's just limit space so that it fits there. I'll just remove a few things here so that we mock, so that so our first line will look something like this, and then we'll have the other stuff there. But now we just want to take from 0 to the rows that they specified. So if it's 2, then we'll take this to 2. So that's why we are slicing it this way. Now we're done. We have everything we need to call this function, right? So we have all that we need to call this function. But remember, we've only covered the first part. So let's test it. Let's just test if it works. Does it print or return our max? So we just expect it to return 0 at this point. The other test cases obviously won't be covered at this point. So let's see, what do we have? It's still evaluating. Runtime error. I don't know why. Let's see, it didn't print anything because unexpected token. Alright, let's see where the error is. 24, we have u, and then we have a function here. So everything seems balanced. This thing doesn't, it doesn't balance out your stuff. So let me just quickly check. So this is for the input, so you can go. I don't know why you are here. So yeah, the function now is balanced. So let's recheck. Still didn't print. Max border is not defined. Obviously you make errors. Max borders, max border makes more sense because we just want 1, shouldn't have an S. Yeah, that sounded so funny. Let's wait for it. Yeah, it's part, so it says wrong answer. So now we've compiled. It's better. See if we have our 0. Yes, we do. So we've printed 0, right? So now we want it to work. We want it to print 10 zeros. So what do we do? We come back here. Let's have a for loop so that the printing can happen t number of times. So it's let I is equal to 0 and I is less than t, and I increments like this, right? So this is what we'll have. Let's see. Okay, and now the question you should be asking yourself is, which part should be inside the loop? So that question is quite easy. So it's quite easy. For every question we want to know the number of rows and columns. For each question we wanna for each test case rather, we wanna know our lines. So there's 2 parts. The rows and columns and the lines should be here. Why are you not moving? Cool. Now we've done that. I hope it still makes sense. I hope it does. let's see. Okay, we still need to minimize you so that you don't distract. Cool. So not from more. Perfect. This thing is not formatted, so we just have to make sense of it, right? So this is where my for loop ends. Let me just do this. Cool. And let's remove these comments. Right, so now we have that. So let's see if it works or not. I'm not sure if this const won't ruin us or not. Let's see if we print 10 items. So if we get that right, we are sorted. Wrong answer. Yay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 zeros. So if your function, this part worked perfectly, it would return what is expected, and then your test cases would pass. So basically that's how you manipulate your data. As I said, sometimes I start with whatever idea I have in mind. I actually forgot something. There's something wrong with my code, though it worked. So remember, when you slice something, you're not removing. So every time this part, our rows and columns will be standard, will always be the same. So what we need to do, after we've taken our lines, so after we've extracted lines, we just need to remove the first two parts. So we can do this underneath or here. Right, so how do we remove? We remove by using splice. So it's data.splice, and then you specify from which position and how many items you want to remove. So we just want to remove all the rows that we have taken already. We want to remove them so that the next time when it comes back, it just moves to the next row, right? So we just want to use splice in this case. That should work. It should just still produce the same results as before, but now I'm sure that our rows and columns are more accurate. We can maybe print them out instead of 0 and yeah, let's try that. Let's just try that to see. Let's just return RC. Perfect. And then let's wake you up. And let's see our output. See? So we have 2, 15, 7, 9, 18, 11, 1. Yeah, basically I think it works. So that's it. To simplify this, I think there's a method I saw in HackerEarth. Instead of using splice and slice, okay, I think slice we do need, but splice I don't think so. So basically we want to traverse from, so we want to group everything like this. So this should be one group, right? So the next time we move, we just increment our counter, and then accessing it should be easy because we already know that this will be position 0, and then this will be the next position. So slice will still work. So that's where you introduce a variable, a global variable. So yeah, you can call it whatever, and then while you loop, that's what you will be changing. Instead of this, you'll be specifying where you are at this point. So let's say our global variable was J, so you will be at J. Maybe J is our whatever test case. Oh, we are actually inside a loop, so we can use I. We can still continue with I, because if you check, this will be test case 0, so we can use 0 to access this test case, and then from this we can take in our RC. From this we can take in our lines, so this will definitely be at the top. But yeah, basically you guys probably get the idea. Just lazy to implement it.